Rolling.
September 27th, 1944. It was the 445th Bomb Group, made up of 4 squadrons, 700, 701, 702, 703, that flew. There were 39 airplanes that started out from the base. 35 of them, 4 of them were aborted because they had medical problems. 35 of them went to the target. 25 of them were knocked down in the air in 4.5 minutes. 4 of them crashed. 3 of them got back. And I don't know what happened. It's all on that. Don't worry.
Backtracking a bit, then I suppose we just start with your name to the camera.
Okay. Is this the camera?
Yeah,
It
this
is,
is.
yes.
My name is. My full name is Herbert R. Schwartz, Schwartz. My name is really Herb, that's what everybody calls me.
Okay.
I live in the outskirts of Kansas City, Missouri, in a place called Overland Park, Kansas.
And for the rest of you, if you could speak to me, that would be great. Okay.
Thanks,
And
Phil.
can you tell me where you were stationed?
I was stationed in Tiverham, England, which is about 18 or 20 miles south of Norwich.
What was your unit? Sorry, and who were you with?
I was with the 445th Bomb Group, 700th Bomb Squadron. There's 4 squadrons to a group.
And what were your initial experiences when you went over to Tiverham?
Well, unfortunately, I had an unusual experience because just before I got to Tiverham, they took the B-24 bomber and they changed it from a 10-man crew to a 9-man crew. They took the Sperry Ball turret underneath the airplane and took it completely off, only in England, not in any place else, not in Italy. But they took it off because we had fighter escorts on most of our missions. And because that turret weighed so much, it took so much additional fuel that they took them completely off and they changed it from a 10-man crew to a 9-man crew. So when I arrived in England, I didn't even have a position to fly. I trained for almost a year to fly the Sperry Ball turret. At that time, you couldn't weigh over 130 pounds. I weighed 126 pounds. It's the only way you could get into it. It's a circular ball that protruded from the bottom of the fuselage of the B-24. So when I got over there, my crew, I was late in getting there because I ended up in the hospital in Bangor, Maine on the way over, and I was about 10 or 12 days late on picking up my crew, but it wouldn't have made any difference because I didn't have a place to fly. They eliminated my position. So after I was in Tiverham, the second day they sent a master sergeant armament man into the talk to me, and he took me out, and in 30 minutes he told me all about the tail turret, how to feed the guns, how to put it in your radio equipment, how to put it in your headed suit, how to do all the other things. And in 30 minutes, and the very next day, I flew the longest mission I ever flew in my life, which was to Munich, Germany, and I was on oxygen for 10 hours and 55 minutes. That was my first mission as a tail gunner, and had never flown that position before. I was trained for one position for over a year. The other one I trained for 30 minutes. So in a way, it's kind of interesting because I was so green and so stupid and dumb about combat that when I didn't realize that they took all these bombers and put them up into the air, and then they would form them and take 2 or 3 hours to form them to go ahead and fly their missions. But the formations they had to get together with, and my commanding officer, Colonel Jones, who commanded the 445th, we were flying above our own field. I didn't know it. I thought we were in enemy territory, and he flew a P-47, which is very, very similar to an FW-190, which is a German fighter. And I almost shot him down on my first mission because they said if anybody points their nose at you, put your guns on it. And I thought we were in enemy territory. And all the time that was my commanding officer up there to formate, to get us all together so that we could go on with the rest of the people onto the target area. Really kind of an experience. If it hadn't been for those waist gunners who had several missions under their belt that were behind the tail turret, they said, for Christ's sake, don't shoot that guy, that's our CO. Anyway, it was just because of the fact that I was so stupid. I didn't even dream of it, some of the things that they did at Conrad.
Can I ask you how old you were then?
22.
22.
Yeah, I celebrated my 22nd birthday at the Cornhusker Hotel in Lincoln, Nebraska, where I picked up my new bomber, and I flew my new bomber. The second day I was there at midnight. We left from Omaha, Nebraska, Lincoln, Nebraska, which is where we picked up our planes, and we flew to Bangor, Maine. And in the process of going from Lincoln to Bangor, I took the canvas turret off of my Sperry Ball. It came up into the plane, and then you lowered it down hydraulically into the bottom part of the airplane. And I laid down to pick the canvas covering off of the turret. And when I did so, I wrenched my back, which I had a bad back, and I couldn't straighten up. I was just in like a semicircle. And the fellas on the plane took me and made a bed for me in the Bombay doors and lifted me into this place so I could lie down there. And they all went up front and had their sandwiches and smoked and did whatever they had to do. And they were about 4 hours coming back to check on me. In the meantime, I was freezing to death. It was real cold there, and I had no way of calling anybody because there was no intercom there. And when they came back to get me, I was, God, I don't know how cold I could have been. And they pulled me out of that Bombay and put me up at the front of the airplane, carried me up there. But it was a horrible experience, just terrible. And here again, it was all because of the fact that I ended up, when I got to Bangor, they had an ambulance pick me up right at the airport and take me right into the hospital. That's how my crew went ahead of me, and they were there maybe 12 or 14 days before I caught up with them. So it was an interesting experience. And then when I was in Bangor, when I got out of the hospital, they did everything for you. They had cars that even drove you around the base. They had people come in and make your bugs for you. And that's where the University of Maine is, in Bangor. And although I was in the hospital, they wouldn't let me call home. But the nurse and the doctor talked to my parents in Kansas City while I was sitting right there, but they wouldn't let me talk to them because it was a point of debarkation, and there was a lot of secretiveness in it. So when I got out of Bangor, they called me in and they said, if we don't get you out here in the next 72 hours, we'll send you across on Air Transport Command, ATC. And I flew overseas with about 20 nurses and about 3 generals, and I was the only enlisted man on the ship. And I was traveling under government per diem, which meant I had to pay for my own meals and everything. So we went from Bangor, Maine to Presque Isle, Maine. They cut me up real late at night, took me to Presque Isle, Maine on a train. And that's where I left America to go over to Newfoundland. And when I got to Newfoundland, I had all of this goodies. This friend of mine that I was telling you about, Jeff Crystal, stationed in Norwich, I had all of this. I was able to buy everything. I wasn't restricted as to what I could take, and I carried it all over England with me, to England. But when I got to Newfoundland, somebody stole all my money and my wristwatch from underneath my pillow, and I didn't even have enough money to pay for my meals for the balance of the trip, because all my records were ahead of me, my pay records and everything else. And I had no way in the world of even surviving in Newfoundland because I had no money. So I went to a couple of the nurses that I met on the plane, and I went to their quarters, and they gave me money to pay for my meals till I got to where my records were going to be, so I could draw money down from the government. It's a little bit different kind of an experience than most people would have.
Yeah. What was your first impressions of people in Norfolk when you arrived?
Where?
In Norfolk, in Tiverton.
Oh, well, I didn't go to Tiverton. Nobody went immediately to their air base. They went to Ireland to take pre-combat training. And I was in pre-combat training for about a week or 10 days. Then I went from there to Scotland. I went to Scotland for a day and then to Ireland. Then I went to Tiverton, and I don't know what I thought of. All I know is that my crew already had 3 or 4 missions under their belt, and here I was sitting here without even a place to fly, and it was just a terrible feeling because you were like on the outside looking in. I had no place to go. I didn't know what I was going to do, and they satisfied that real quickly by finding me another position to fly.
I want to speak to you a little bit about the Castle mission.
Now the Castle missions, it's easy to find out all about that. That was just a terrible, terribly bad experience. And that was the worst mission that had ever been flown in any war by any group whatsoever. And nobody, all during World War II, nobody ever sustained that kind of a loss on one mission for one group and 4 squadrons on the Castle mission. That's why it's so famous, because we were flying to Kassel, Germany. We had our fighter escorts with us, and when we got right to what they call the IP, the initial point, our pilot, Major McCoy, took our 4 squadrons of airplanes, which consisted of 35 airplanes, and for some reason or other, the navigator told him to turn left. And when he turned left, we were going away from Kassel. We did not know this, but the navigator was creating a situation with the pilot to turn left, and when he turned left, 2 or 3 of the other navigators, including mine, knew that we had made a mistake. We should not have gone left, and they tried to get hit Major McCoy, who was leading the group, back into the formation of the 8th Air Force, and he wouldn't go back, but feeling that there was additional danger there because of other airplanes that were in the air, and he didn't want to take a chance, but he wasn't sure that he was in the wrong. And as he as he turned left and went on down the road, we dropped our bombs on a place about 23 miles from Kassel. And it was at 23 miles where our escort was waiting for us on the other side of the bomb run in Kassel. They were waiting for us there, and we didn't show up, so it took them 4.5 minutes to get from here to here. And that's what they did. We got hit by about 150 fighters, and that was all Germany had left. Germany had already been battered, beaten down, and this was apparently every airplane that the German Luftwaffe had in the air that day, and they were just sitting on there waiting for cripples, people that had problems with their airplanes or what have you. And here we come along with 35 airplanes with no escort. It was a perfect palm for us. So they came in groves of airplanes, and they formulated behind my turret, behind the group, and they came in 9 and 10 at a time at the tail. They always came to the tail, because if they ever got the tail turret out, they had control of the bomber. Nobody else could put their guns on it. No. So they always wanted to go to the tail. And when they take 9 or 10 airplanes, one right after another at the tail, if you take your fingers off of those triggers for as much as 5 to 7 seconds, you'll burn a barrel out. So you have to have pretty good instincts to be able to hold your barrels, your 2 guns, down as you were spitting it out to enemy pilots. And the only reason why I got back is because I was flying off of the lead ship in my group, and they knocked down all the rest of the airplanes behind me. So I had an extra minute or so, a minute and a half, to get ready for these guys when they came in. So you couldn't miss it. They were spitting fire at you, and they came in so close, it looked like they were on dope. And there was no way that you could miss it. But what happened is, on my ship, they knocked out 2 engines, the left inboard engine and the right outboard engine on either side of the airplane, and they hit the tail. The tail is like this on either side of the B-24. They hit the cable and the tail here, and this whole half a tail was just taken away from the airplane and hanging by a cable, by a steel cable, and it was doing this and taking my turret, which is in the middle, and shaking it like this. Even under hydraulic pressure, you could not, that turret was going back and forth, shaking your guts out. So I had time to, when the next group of airplanes were coming in at my tail, I had time to get out of my turret, And I had to underdo about 5 or 6 different things, electrical, radio, everything else. And as I got out on the catwalk right behind my turret, I was down on my knees and my turret was absolutely empty. So anybody coming in would figure that the turret was empty because it was shaking so damn badly. And when they came in, I could see them. I got plexiglass in front of me, and I had a black helmet on, a flat shoe. It was pretty hard for them to kill me, except on this area right here. And I darted up, and when those planes came in, all I had to do is grab my guns and just give a group or two, and I would have knocked an airplane down. They were so close you couldn't miss it. So they thought it was empty, but all the time I was on my knees behind my turret, and I raised up with my guns, and just as they came in, my guns were going on these enemy airplanes. And that day I was able to get knocked down one FW-190 and one ME-109. FW-190 and the ME-109 were Messerschmitts. Those were 2 airplanes, but they'd already done all the damage to everybody. There were people throwing parachutes and everything all around you, planes going down, and one plane right next to me started to veer over to my plane, and it was completely on fire. It caught in the front, and in a matter of a few seconds, the whole plane was one ball of flame, and it came. If I had screamed out to our pilot, if he had taken that plane upward, that plane could have come right into the side of us. And the evasive action took us up, and it came right underneath us. Of course, there was nobody could get out of there. It was an impossibility. It was nothing but a big ball of fire.
So it was just chaos in the sky?
Oh, terrible.
Could you even see any sky for it?
Well, you have to remember that there were already a lot of damage.
Yeah.
The only reason why I got back is because of where I was placed. Because there's no way you can sustain that kind of a lot of that number of airplanes and not get killed. It just was an impossibility.
Can you tell me again how many survived?
Well, out of 35 airplanes, 25 of them were shot down in 4.5 minutes. I crashed in France after France had been retaken, and after we came back through the Ruhr Valley with all this damage we had, we could only hold about 10,000 feet of air. And we had to throw everything off. All of our personal belongings, all of our radio equipment, everything, throw it off so that our plane would be able to stay at hold altitude. And when we came back, our navigator says, well, you can all rest, you've been in friendly territory for 3.5 minutes. Just at that time that they said this, we were over the heart of Koblenz, 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 Germany. And that flak just came marching right up to our plane. And we thought we were in friendly territory, and we also thought that we were going to be in Brussels, Belgium. But our navigator was evidently given one set of directions to the pilot who was going to another end, and instead of being in Brussels, Belgium, we were close to Reims, France, and that's where we crashed. So it was kind of a screwed up situation.
Do you remember what happened then after that?
Well, we came into this tar paper runway, which was nothing but paper, roofing paper, that they used for a fighter strip. It was an American fighter strip, a P-47 and our plane just tore up right down the center of the runway. We knew that we couldn't land on asphalt because we had a bad gas leak, and we knew that we had to come in on either the ground, or we were going to have to barrel in because we couldn't land as such. We had no nose wheel or anything. And as we came down, we tore up this whole runway. Our plane came to, we all jumped out of it. I was the first one out, naturally. And I hurt my back when I jumped out there because somebody forgot to strap their gun in, their race gun, and it came around and hit me in the back. But I got out of the airplane, and as I was going down the runway, I could see everybody else jumping out of that airplane. And we stayed there overnight, and the next day, ATC, American Transport Command, sent a a C-47 over to that base and took us all back to town.
Do you remember arriving in Tiverton?
Oh yes, I arrived in Tiverton about 2:30 in the afternoon on the 28th of September.
What was the mood like as you arrived?
Oh, I really don't know. I think we were just alleviated with the fact that we're still alive. It was just a real bad experience. And when we got on the ground that morning, before that plane came over and picked us up, we counted over 1,000 bullet holes in our airplane, 1,000 bullet holes, and not one man of the 9 men on that crew got even scratched. Not wounded, no nothing. We had all 9 members of that crew able to get out of there. So it is miraculous. It is. And when we went back the next day, they fired us with a bunch of scotch, and they kept us in briefing for several hours. But it was just a real terrible experience. And then when I went to my barracks that evening after having 3 or 4 drinks and eating a little food, and I went into my barracks. When I walked in, there were about 35 empty bunks in there. So you knew how serious it was. All those people were killed or they were prisoners. So I was one of about 6 or 8 people that lived in that barracks. The rest of it was empty. Just unusual, very unusual. And as I say, I owe an awful lot to the guy that flew that airplane because he was damn good. Lieutenant John French was his name. And he's still alive. But on my original crew, the one that I got lost my job with, they're all dead. All 9 of them are gone. 3 of them died this past year.
Thank you so much for telling us.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No. This was a terrible experience. And you want to know something? I put it all down in writing because I kept a diary when I was over there. And just recently, in the last year or so, one of my closest friends' wives knew that I kept this diary. And she had me send it back to her in New Jersey, and she turned it into a book by me of everything that happened to me while I was overseas. And everybody that read that book, it's just, everybody's come back and said, God, they couldn't believe this book. All the things, all the materials, and all the facts I had in it. I reduced it all to writing. It was a 22-year-old writing a book, which to me was nothing. And even the language and everything else was so amateurish. But everybody that read that book, everybody kept saying, I want a copy, I want a copy. So finally, I had copies of it made. And the original diary is with Linda Dewey now. Her father was the one that was between the head of the GMMA, Castle Memorial Mission. That was.
Can I ask a question? Is there a copy of that in the Memorial Library?
No, there isn't.
Would it be possible?
Oh yes, I guess it would. I've got a copy of it. Sure. It's both personal and it's also about my leaves and the people I've met. And I have a breakdown of every single mission, and I even was able to get friendly with a major in G2, which is intelligence, and I got all the aerial photographs of every mission I flew. Not written on the back of it, there's just a number, but the number refers to a number on a map and tells you exactly where that mission was and what our destination was.
That would definitely be useful to us.
Well, it would be.
Yeah, I can get a copy of the book. I don't. If you're like everybody else, you'll say it's great, but it's not really. It's just the language in it is even terrible. I'm embarrassed. I'm in my last year of college, and I wrote it like an amateur. Anyway, I didn't read this book. I didn't read this book until 2006. The only person that ever read that was my father. The only person until 1993. Terry Moore, who was a good friend of mine. She was married to Howard Hughes. She was a very famous movie actress years ago. Terry Moore, and she read part of the book. And she knew Jimmy Stewart. Jimmy Stewart was in my group. He flew in my group. And she knew him, and she arranged for me to spend an evening with Jimmy Stewart and his wife in California after the war, which was one of the highlights of my whole damn trip. I mean, everything. And
Would you like to tell me more about that?
Well, it was just a wonderful opportunity. She wanted me to, in 1993, to do a movie. She begged me to do a movie. She was a very famous actress, and she had the finances and everything else. And she wanted me to do a movie, and I had to take off like 90 days and reduce everything to writing. And she wanted John Travolta to play my part. He called me from up in Canada, where he was doing a movie, and he says, if Terry goes ahead and is able to get this movie done, he said, I would be glad to play part of it. He owns a B-24, one of the 3 that are still going in America, 3 that are flyable. He's got one right in his backyard, and he's the pilot. He also has a commercial jet liner in his backyard. But he was in Kansas City about 7 or 8 months ago, and I had pictures made with him. And through Terry Moore and other people in California that I knew, when he came to Kansas City, before he dedicated this museum, he came to me and we visited for quite a while, and I gave him all these things having to do with the B-24 and the Castle mission and everything else. And I put it into, I wrote him a couple of letters and put it into a binder and gave it to him because he wanted to read it. Whether he read it or not, I don't know, but at any rate, he's very, very interested, particularly in antique or older airplanes.
So that was an unexpected development.
Yeah. I've had a lot of experiences from being a damn tail cutter. A lot of things happen to me, and as a result of it, I don't know, but just a lot of things. I've had people calling me. I've had somebody in England who's writing a book that's called me a couple times and wanted to come to Kansas City.